This video is sponsored by Incogni.
NATO's a paper tiger. Putin's not afraid of NATO. Putin's afraid of us, very afraid of us.
I really think there's no way to sugarcoat it anymore. NATO is getting weaker by the day. I mean, we've all seen Trump's tweets and many interviews that are slowly chipping away at the alliance, one statement or tweet at a time. He pressures his allies to back wars he starts, Iran, but when it comes to a war on our continent, one that we didn't start, he seems happy to openly support the enemy. And that's frustrating, but also pretty dangerous. And Europe, thank God, is finally starting to think of some alternatives. Because they actually met on Thursday to talk about the European Union's very own defense clause. You might not have heard of it. It's called Article 42.7. And this actually works quite similarly to Article 5 from NATO. Okay, but to first really understand this, we do need to look at Article 5 from NATO a bit deeper. And when I go to the actual text and read it, it says, and I quote, "The parties agree that an armed attack against one or more of them in Europe or North America shall be considered an attack against them all. Each of them will assist the party or party so attacked, such action as it deems necessary, including the use of armed forces." Great. I mean, we all know this about NATO, right? It is one of the biggest reasons why Europe stayed out of war, with each other at least, for the last couple of decades. But the EU has their own defense clause too. Let me read it out. If a member state is the victim of armed aggression on its territory, the other member state shall have toward it an obligation of aid and assistance by all the means in their power. Now, to be very honest with you, this does sound incredibly similar to the NATO one, if not even a little bit stronger. Because let's have a look at the wording right here. All means in their power, compared to such action as it deems necessary. I mean, right here I always think about Germany, who first sent helmets to Ukraine when Russia invaded. Quite embarrassing. Nonetheless though, there is really no way around it. The NATO version is actually a lot stronger. Yes, both are mutual defense obligations, but that's about as far as the similarities go. And let me try and explain this through two examples. Starting with NATO, where Article 5 has been triggered only once before. This was in 2001. After the 9/11 attacks, Article 5 was triggered for the first and only time in history. The US pretty much asked for help, and the NATO North Atlantic Council met, reviewed the evidence that the attack came from abroad, and unanimously agreed. An attack on one, in this case the US, was an attack on all. And this is where NATO really becomes a completely different beast. Because once Article 5 is confirmed, NATO can utilize an existing structure to actually run a war. In 2003, NATO took over the International Security Assistance Force, in short, ISAF. It was NATO's mission in Afghanistan. And at its peak, it managed over 400 military bases across the country and commanded 130,000 troops from 42 different countries. That was a full NATO command, with multinational troops, NATO standardized logistics, and NATO leadership on the ground. It's kind of like a pre-built machine that you just have to turn on when a crisis like this arises. Now, compare that to 2015, when France activated Article 42.7 after the Paris terror attacks. This was the first time the EU clause was ever used, and it shows us a completely different model of solidarity. Because unlike NATO, there's no unanimous council that has to meet and confirm the attack. But and here's the big difference. Instead of a single EU general taking control from a central bunker, the EU works through a bilateral network. France pretty much went to its neighbors and said, "Here's our specific situation. How can you best support us?" And each country responded very differently. For example, the UK, who was in the EU at the time, could immediately increase airstrikes in Syria against the very group that attacked Paris. And at the same time, countries like Germany and Estonia sent troops to Mali and the Sahel to take over French peacekeeping duties. This pretty much freed up thousands of French elite forces to return home and protect the streets of Paris. So, under the EU clause, military aid is simply much more decentralized, where the EU often doesn't even play a role at all. And that's the core of it, because in NATO, everyone joins one mission run by one commander, but under the EU clause, everyone does their own thing to help out. And look, I think it's pretty obvious by now that the EU clause just isn't as strong as NATO. It's not just a lack of central command either. There are two big other reasons why it feels a bit like NATO's little sister. First, the text of Article 42 also explicitly says that EU defense cooperation must be consistent with commitments under NATO. Think about this. The EU's own law acknowledges that NATO is the primary framework for European defense. It is legally designed to be a supplement, not a replacement. And second, Article 42.7 also includes something called a neutrality clause. This basically means that neutral countries like Ireland, Austria, and Malta can also fulfill their obligations through non-military aid, like medical supplies or financial support, rather than sending troops. And in NATO, there's simply not such an opt-out. If Article 5 is triggered, every member is expected to contribute to the collective defense. So yeah, definitely not the same weight as NATO. But things might finally be changing, because just yesterday, EU leaders met to discuss a proper roadmap for if Article 42.7 is ever triggered. And two of the people that are leading this charge are the Foreign Affairs Commissioner Kaja Kallas and the EU's Defense Commissioner Andreas Kubilius. He wants to revamp 42.7 to make it operational, complete with a clear procedure, and most importantly, an integrated military command. Kubilius is kind of thinking big here, because he has called this year already for a 100,000 strong European army that would exist in addition to our national forces. And honestly, for people watching this channel and know me, this is the way forward. Because the way I see it, we need a European command structure that sits right in the middle here, in between all the different countries and whatever crisis, such as the one in France a couple of years ago, there is in the world. We don't even have to start from zero either, because we have battle groups. For those that don't know, these are high-readiness multinational military units of about 1,500 troops each, designed for rapid response. But yeah, they've never ever been used, and they're sitting idle at the moment, and is something that we can definitely connect to a European command center or pillar. And yeah, over time, I agree with Kubilius. That can grow into a 100,000 strong force that is directly commanded at an EU level. That would be great. And to be very clear here, as I've always also said, this does not mean NATO has to die. This European command structure could just slot into NATO when it makes sense. For example, when there's major world missions that we want to do together with our Canadian and Turkish friends. But if there's a crisis where it's in Europe's specific interest to act alone, we should finally be able to do it. And battle groups or a larger force is the way forward. But yeah, I am seeing some positive indications that the EU is looking for some sort of solution here.
What we need and what we are going to discuss today is to give substance to Article 42.7, what is going to happen in case a member state decides to trigger the specific article. We need to to have an operational plan, let's say, on what steps will be followed when a member state triggers the specific article.
Now, over to our sponsor, who can help you take back control of your data. Let me explain. Right before Christmas, while I was waiting for packages, I got a text supposedly from DHL. Perfect timing, legit logo. It said there was a delivery issue and I just need to pay a couple of euros. So yeah, I obviously clicked. The website looked exactly like DHL. Same color, same layout, but yeah, a fake tracking number. I was halfway through it filling it out when it finally hit me. Total scam. And it wasn't a one-off either. Scam calls, phishing emails, sketchy links, they keep on coming because my personal data is out there. And that is why I love Incogni. This isn't some privacy app or email filter. It's your personal data cleanup crew. Incogni hunts down shady data brokers, demands they remove your info, and even wrestles with objections if needed. And the best part, with the unlimited plan, you can send Incogni any link to our website exposing your data, and they'll get it removed for you. I'm not just talking about data brokers here, but literally any place your info shows up online. And it's so simple. You create an account, share the bare minimum information needed to find your profiles, like your email and address, then give Incogni permission to legally contact those brokers for you. So, if you want to take back control of your data, click the link below or go to incogni.com/EUMadeSimple to get 60% off an annual plan completely risk-free with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you to all of our presidents who make all of this possible. See you in the next video.